Hi, my name is Grace Lynch, and this is my first regular video in the Wilderness Chronicles series. So how I envision this is that I'll make the videos and I'll catalog them. Some will be have a prefix of A, the letter A, and then I'll number the video, and then each letter will be associated with a specific topic inside the Wilderness Chronicles. Eventually, the plan is to do these in 10 to 15 minute sound bites and upload them to my YouTube channel, Substack, and eventually Zenodo so that they become a database. A lot of this is going to unfold as the videos unfold. Each topic is going to be hopefully a kind of standalone. The branches are going to interweave because I had to build everything from the ground up. So I had to come up with my own concepts, my own terms in many cases, to talk about the dynamic that I'm working with at any given time. The title of this particular video is called Meaning Before Understanding. And where it came from was immediately following brain rehab in 2015. When the neurologist identified the TBI 27 years after it had happened, and also identified that I'm autistic and have a kind of synesthesia that had become much more profound with the TBI that had happened almost 3 decades earlier, it had become the foundation of how I approach what meaning and language are. And so there was very little guidance available. 27 years after the fact, there wasn't much they could do. So there was about a month's brain rehab in Beaverton, Oregon, and I was given dialogue classes. I was taught about calendars. I was put in a virtual reality machine to determine where the dizziness problems were coming from. It turns out I have problems in my upper spine apparently from the brain injury. My spinal cord looks like a drain pipe. But it's stable and everything. So in any case, the dizziness is affected by my eyes and my cervical column. It isn't the usual ear crystals in the ears, and it isn't in my feet. And the conversation thing, I was given like a guidance to roughly count the number of seconds between sentences when a person's talking to understand when to insert. And it was a very crude understanding of language. It's 11 years ago now, so I'm a little bit more sophisticated now. But that was beginning my road back, and it was horrifying because I had been in this languageless place for 27 years. When I lost the scaffolding of how meaning and language connect, and no one was there to tell me what that was or what I had lost or what it meant, I was left only with that sensibility that I was born with, which is part of my autism, that I was inside living music. It's not really music, but my brain, the part of my brain that understands what music is the part that's active when I process the world that way. When I would listen, when I was in 10th grade in high school, I took Euclidean geometry, and I saw my first proof. It was very basic proof. Many of you will know this if you've taken Euclidean geometry, the proof of the side-angle side postulate. And Mr. Rowland wrote it up on the board. He made a chart, premise, conclusion, and he laid it all out there. And I kind of relaxed. I was 15 years old and bored as hell. And it sort of washed over me, and I didn't really register what he was saying until he wrote through at the bottom. And then it all came together like this beautiful crystal perfect bell. It was a musical, visual, inside my head experience. It was just astonishing. It was a kind of music I'd never heard before. Captivating. And so I found very quickly that I didn't actually have to listen to the teacher or read the book very much. I would just sort of read at the mathematics and wait for it to come together in my head. And once I heard the sound, I'd know that it was correct. And then I learned that I could listen to the sound, and if it sounded perfect, then I could just build words around the perfect structure of it to communicate with other people. But I didn't need the words to do the math. That came much later. And when I heard incorrect reasoning, it would sound like a cracked bell. So it was very distinct. And I can remember I was really socially pathetic, and I wanted to make friends. So I was sophomore, a geeky math nerd in high school in a small town, and I tried to talk with other students in the classroom about listen for the bell. You don't have to do the homework or study for tests or listen to Mr. Rowland or anything. Just listen, and when you hear the bell, then you'll remember, and then you can just piece it all together later. They had no idea what I was talking about. Of course, in the early 80s, nobody knew what autism was. Nobody knew what any of this stuff was. So when I fell, all the scaffolding that is language and meaning was shattered. I hit my forehead, and it was gone. It was global aphasia, so that it was both receptive and expressive aphasia regarding both spoken and written language. And the spoken expressive came back first, and then the written, and then the receptive spoken came back some. The written receptive never really came back much. From then on, I needed to hide the fact that I was largely illiterate, so I would memorize everything. When I was 7 years old, I was IQ tested, and my parents were told that academically I was ready for high school. I was reading and doing mathematics at a high school level, and our family was just poor. We lived too far outside the city to get me to the special schooling at the time, so I had to go to public school. It was bored as hell. So it wasn't any problem for me to just memorize everything. I thought, and I didn't have any awareness that I was processing any differently. I didn't really understand. I didn't really understand how anyone else could not be doing what I was doing. I thought they were maybe being stubborn, or maybe they were bored with me or something. It was truly inconceivable to me that other people didn't have this extra way of processing, because if you had to do things, I can remember when I tried to explain the concept of the listening for the crystal bell and the people being impatient with me, and my thought was, fine, and do it the hard way. You want to waste all that time doing all the little word things in a line? Jesus Christ. So I thought they were being annoyed with me, not that they truly didn't comprehend and couldn't perceive that way. So I processed inside this musical kind of whatever sensibility thing. When I was diagnosed formally with autism in 2017, I began reading around. My son was diagnosed in high school, so it was like 18, 20 years ago. So he had a much better grasp, but I didn't understand what that was, and we were divorced. His mother and I were divorced by then, and I was in the throes of the brain injury and heavily medicated because of misdiagnosis. So I had never really processed what autism was. For me, he was just a reasonable kid. His brain worked pretty properly, the way a brain that should. More reasonably than most, I thought. The joke that wasn't really a joke when I was formally diagnosed, the neuropsychologist told me that I was autistic. My first thought was, so that's what's wrong with everybody else. And so I wanted to understand more about it, and I quickly found the work of Dr. Temple Grandin. I saw one of the movies. I couldn't really read the books. I found some things by Oliver Sacks, an anthropologist on Mars. That was pretty cool to listen to that audiobook. She talked about visual learning. That was sort of like what I did in terms of sound. I would listen my way through something, and correct reasoning had a perfect harmonic sound. Incorrect reasoning sounded like a collision or a badly tuned violin orchestra section in an orchestra. So after I fell, that became the foundation of how, when words came back, I didn't really understand why they ever belonged to what they belonged to in the first place. And the VA explained to me when I got service connected 5 years ago that if they had caught it within 6 months, probably there would have been no effect at all. But because it was 1987 and nobody knew that I didn't know that I could have sustained a brain injury, I thought probably it was something I was doing wrong, something I had misunderstood. Maybe God was mad at me for something because I'm gay. He didn't like gay people, and there's all this stuff. I didn't have a reasonable explanation. So I processed when words came back from the perspective of that harmonic music, and then that's came to be how I approach what language is. But I didn't need language to function. I processed based on how everything felt relative to everything else. I learned what things did and then built words as needed to express myself. But I didn't need to express myself to myself, and most of my time I was by myself over the course of my life. So, the words became, I pick them up if I need them. Especially since it was so hard until they found the clonidine in 2015. So when I'm trying to build my way back after brain rehab, and I learned, I counted the seconds between sentences to know when to appropriately insert, and began participating in the world, I began wanting to integrate the trauma. The first thing I found was that the traditional understanding is that meaning follows from understanding. Well, here's the problem. Those 27 years between when I fell and when they introduced the clonidine and slammed everything back together again were without language. They didn't have language attached to it. Applying language later didn't magically mean it had language at the time. So now I'm in a logical collision. The world says valid meaning in order for me to correctly integrate and participate back in the social world I'm desperate to get back to, tells me that the only kind of valid meaning follows from experience. The entire body of my adult life is a block of time, but 27 years from age 22 to age whatever it was in 2015, I guess it was 50, in that did not have language. So the recovery requires that I have this as a logical assumption. The integrity of my direct experience is the opposite, and these two are completely irreconcilable. The price of traditionally reintegrating into the social language world required me to sacrifice the entirety of my adult life. And the act of holding on to the entirety of my adult life without language and deciding it had meaning meant letting go of the premise that meaning follows from understanding. The two are exclusive, what is it? The excluded middle. I can't remember the term now. Sucks having aphasia. They're not possible. They're a contradiction to hold at the same time. And so if I was going to have peace, I realized that for myself, I could not jettison my entire life. Everything that happened from 22 to 30 included my marriage, the birth of my children, which was amazing, holding my children, all of my college graduations, all of my years on the street, the mental health treatment, being electricity run through my skull, being on the streets. There were domestic violence things, and there was different toxic things and abuses and violence and the death of different people, and I couldn't just let all that go. So, but if I was going to have meaning interact with the world, I needed to have a sense of what the meaning was. And so I decided, well, if we're going to name it as having meaning and it doesn't have an understanding, I made use of the history of mathematics, and we came up with the concept of zero. And because zero, to be defined as a mathematical concept, it couldn't be an ordinary number because everybody has a different sense of absence. We had to expand what a number could be so that zero could be included as a number. It doesn't have all the properties of integers. But by expanding what numbers can be to include zero, we expanded what mathematics can do. And I decided that I would do that with meaning as well. I'd stipulate that there is a personal kind of meaning. I call it imaginal meaning, not imaginary, but imaginal. It's the perfect personal, intrinsic meaning of a person. And that can be complemented and related to traditional meaning if it's done carefully and you figure out how to do it in a way that is sustainable and consistent. So it's the foundation of what became, for me, the theory of complex meaning, which is like complex numbers, but it works for meaning instead of mathematics. So that's all for this video. I hope you like it. Hope we get the sound right. Okay. See you next time.